When people talk about stopping power or the most lethal round, the discussion usually centers around massive calibers. The .50 BMG that can stop a vehicle. The .338 Lapua favored by military snipers. The 45 ACP that's been dropping targets for over a century. These monsters get all the attention, the respect, the fear. But what if I told you that the most devastating bullet in America isn't what you think? According to FBI data, emergency room physicians, and decades of forensic evidence, America's most brutal bullet isn't about size or muzzle energy. It's about accessibility, psychology, and a lethal combination of factors that have made one particular round responsible for more deaths than any other in U.S. history. Today, we're breaking down the surprising truth about America's deadliest ammunition, the science behind its effectiveness, and why experts in both law enforcement and emergency medicine consider it the most brutal round you can face. Section 1. The Myths. Before we can understand what actually works, we need to demolish some of the myths that have plagued the firearms community for decades. These misconceptions aren't just wrong, they're potentially dangerous if they lead you to make poor self-defense choices. Myth number 1. Bigger calibers knock people down. You've heard it a million times at the gun range. 45 will knock them flat on their back, or 9mm might not have enough stopping power. This idea that a bigger bullet will physically knock someone down is probably the most persistent myth in firearms. Here's why it's completely false. Basic physics. Newton's third law states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If a bullet had enough energy to knock a 200-pound attacker backward, the recoil would do the same to you when you fired it. Think about it. Have you ever seen someone get knocked backward firing a handgun? Of course not. So how could the receiving end experience forces dramatically different from the firing end? Even massive calibers like the .500 S&W, which delivers almost 5 times the energy of a 9mm, don't send people flying like in the movies. In reality, bullet impact is more like a hard punch. It hurts, it damages tissue, but it doesn't launch people through windows. Myth number 2. Hydrostatic shock from handguns. The second myth is that hydrostatic shock from powerful handgun calibers shuts down the body instantly. While temporary cavitation can contribute to wounding, it's massively overblown in handgun rounds. Handguns simply don't reach the velocity threshold needed to create significant hydrostatic shock. That's around 2,000 feet per second, which most handguns fall well short of. Even the highest pressure 9mm plus P plus loads barely break 1,300 feet per second from service-length barrels. True hydrostatic shock, with its neurological effects, is primarily a rifle phenomenon. When the FBI and trauma surgeons examine handgun wounds, they consistently find that the permanent cavity, the actual hole, and penetration depth are what truly matter for stopping threats. Myth number 3. One-shot. Stops are common. Gun store mythology is full of stories about calibers that drop attackers with one shot. You've probably heard claims like, "I carry a .357 Magnum because it's a guaranteed one-shot stopper." The data tells a completely different story. The reality is that outside of central nervous system hits, brain or upper spinal cord, one-shot stops are relatively rare with any handgun caliber. Evan Marshall and Ed Sano's controversial studies on stopping power, which many still cite today, have been thoroughly debunked by deeper statistical analysis. When you look at actual police shooting reports and emergency room data, you find that people regularly continue fighting after being hit multiple times with everything from .22 LR to .44 Magnum. The human body is remarkably resilient. Adrenaline-fueled attackers can continue functioning even with devastating injuries. This is why military and law enforcement training emphasizes continued fire until the threat stops, regardless of caliber used. Myth number 4. The FBI fails of the 1986 Miami shootout. After the infamous 1986 Miami shootout, where FBI agents armed with 9mm revolvers and semi-autos failed to quickly stop two bank robbers, the Bureau launched the most comprehensive study of terminal ballistics ever conducted. This incident is often misrepresented as proof that 9mm is inadequate. What's less discussed is that one of the suspects was hit with a 9mm round that would have been fatal, but it stopped just short of his heart after passing through his arm. The problem wasn't caliber, it was insufficient penetration after encountering an intermediate barrier. This led the FBI to initially adopt 10mm, then .40 S&W. But here's what most people miss. After decades more research and advancements in bullet design, the FBI ultimately circled back to 9mm in 2015. Their own testing determined that with modern ammunition, 9mm now checks all the boxes for terminal performance while offering other significant advantages we'll discuss later. Myth number 5. Expansion matters. More than penetration, many gun owners focus obsessively on how mushroomed their hollow points get, often choosing ammunition based on marketing photos of perfectly expanded bullets. While expansion is important, the FBI's exhaustive testing has consistently shown that penetration is the more critical factor. A bullet that expands beautifully but only penetrates 8 inches won't reach vital organs from many common defensive shooting angles. Section 2. About lethal bullets. Ballistic gel testing provides valuable data points, but nothing beats analyzing what happens in actual defensive shootings. So what does the data tell us about caliber effectiveness in the real world? Law enforcement analysis. The FBI has tracked officer-involved shootings for decades, creating one of the largest databases of handgun terminal effectiveness available. When comparing actual one-shot stop percentages between service calibers, .38 Special, 9mm, 40 S&W, and 45 ACP, their data reveals something surprising. The differences are statistically insignificant. What matters far more is shot placement and adequate penetration. In the FBI's own words from their 2015 training document, there is little to no noticeable difference in the wound tracks between premium-line law enforcement projectiles from 9mm Luger through the 45 Auto. This conclusion was revolutionary enough to reverse decades of FBI policy, leading them back to 9mm from their previous 40 S&W standard. The New York Police Department, one of America's largest law enforcement agencies, conducted their own study of officer-involved shootings spanning 10 years and involving over 200 incidents. Their conclusion? The caliber used had no statistically significant effect on the outcome of the shooting. The physiological versus psychological stop. Another key insight from real-world data is understanding the difference between physiological incapacitation and psychological stops. Dr. Andreas Grabinski, a trauma surgeon and police surgeon, has extensively studied defensive shootings. His research indicates that approximately 80% of people shot with handguns stop their aggressive actions not because they're physically incapacitated, but because they choose to stop. In other words, the vast majority of successful defensive handgun uses end because the attacker decides to cease their assault after being shot, regardless of the caliber used or the severity of their wounds. For the remaining 20% who continue fighting despite being shot, only central nervous system hits or catastrophic blood loss will create reliable physiological stops. And these factors depend primarily on shot placement, not caliber size. Greg Ellifritz's Caliber Study. One of the most comprehensive independent studies on caliber effectiveness was conducted by Greg Ellifritz, who analyzed over 1,800 real-world shootings with handguns. His findings directly contradict many common assumptions about caliber effectiveness. The average number of rounds needed to stop a threat remained surprisingly consistent across calibers. The percentage of one-shot stops was virtually identical between 9mm, .40 S&W, and .45 ACP. Larger calibers showed no significant advantage in immediate incapacitation. The most startling conclusion from Ellifritz's data? The .22 LR, often dismissed as completely inadequate for self-defense, actually had a higher percentage of one-shot stops than the venerated .45 ACP. Does this mean you should carry a .22? Absolutely not. When the .22 failed to stop, it failed catastrophically. But it illustrates how shot placement and psychological factors often outweigh raw ballistic performance. Military experience. The U.S. military's extensive combat experience also provides valuable insights into terminal effectiveness. After over a century with the .45 ACP 1911 and decades with the 9mm Beretta M9, the military has amassed significant data on handgun terminal performance. Their conclusion, formalized in the adoption of the 9mm SIG P320 as the M17/M18, was that with modern ammunition, 9mm provides terminal performance virtually identical to larger calibers, while offering significant advantages in controllability, capacity, and logistics. Special Operations Command, SOCOM, was actually ahead of this curve, having reverted to 9mm years earlier after extensive testing showed that with premium ammunition, the performance gap between calibers had essentially disappeared. Section 3. Ammunition Design. The reason caliber has become increasingly irrelevant in the terminal performance equation comes down to dramatic advances in bullet design over the past 25 years. The evolution of the hollow point. The hollow point bullet has undergone a remarkable evolution since its introduction. Early hollow points were simple, literally just a cavity in the nose of the bullet. They expanded sometimes, but often failed when clogged with clothing or other barriers. Modern premium hollow points are engineering marvels, with specifically designed expansion chambers, skived jackets, polymer-filled tips, and bonded cores. These features ensure reliable expansion across a wide range of velocities while preventing jacket separation. Barrier-blind performance. Perhaps the most impressive advancement is barrier-blind performance. Bullets designed to perform consistently regardless of intermediate barriers. The FBI testing protocol includes tests through heavy clothing, automobile glass, plywood, drywall, and sheet metal. Early hollow points would fail catastrophically when encountering these barriers, either failing to expand or breaking apart completely. Section 4. What matters the most? Let's look at what actually determines handgun effectiveness based on scientific testing and real-world outcomes. Penetration depth. The single most important factor in terminal performance is adequate penetration. The FBI standard of 12 to 18 inches in calibrated ballistic gelatin exists for very specific reasons. Why 12 inches minimum? Because human bodies aren't uniform targets. A frontal shot might need to penetrate an arm before entering the torso. An angled shot might need to traverse more tissue to reach vital organs. Different body types require different penetration depths. This is also why barrier testing is so crucial. In real-world scenarios, bullets often need to penetrate barriers like clothing, car windows, or drywall before reaching the target. Many loads that perform beautifully in bare gelatin fail catastrophically when tested through these common barriers. Consistent expansion. While penetration comes first, reliable expansion is the second critical factor. An expanding bullet creates a larger permanent wound channel and deposits more energy in the target. The key word here is consistent. Many loads expand beautifully in perfect testing conditions, but fail completely in real-world scenarios. Quality defensive ammunition must expand reliably even after passing through barriers like heavy clothing, which can easily plug the hollow point cavity of cheaper designs. These premium bullets on the left all maintained expansion after passing through 4 layers of denim, simulating heavy clothing. The budget hollow points on the right either failed to expand or expanded inconsistently. This is the difference between ammunition that works in marketing photos versus ammunition that works when your life depends on it. Weight retention. The third factor is weight retention, how much of its original mass the bullet maintains after impact. Bullets that fragment or shed pieces may create impressive temporary cavities, but often result in inadequate penetration. The highest performing defensive bullets typically retain 85 to 100% of their original weight. This ensures they can continue penetrating to the required depth while maintaining their expanded diameter. Controllability and shot placement. The most overlooked factor in real-world effectiveness isn't about the bullet itself. It's about your ability to deliver accurate hits under stress. In actual defensive situations, you're dealing with adrenaline, limited visibility, movement, and extreme psychological pressure. Fine motor skills deteriorate dramatically. Studies of police shootings show accuracy rates plummeting to around 20% in real confrontations, meaning 80% of shots miss completely. This is why controllability, your ability to manage recoil and quickly reacquire targets, often matters more than marginal differences in terminal ballistics. In a defensive situation, that time difference could be the difference between stopping a threat and becoming a victim. Remember, shots that miss have zero terminal effectiveness, regardless of caliber. Capacity. Related to controllability is capacity, how many rounds your defensive firearm can hold. While most defensive shootings are resolved with relatively few shots, having additional capacity provides a crucial margin for error when accuracy declines under stress. A standard Glock 17 in 9mm holds 17 plus 1 rounds. The same size firearm in 45 ACP typically holds 13 plus 1. That's a 30% reduction in capacity. In .357 Magnum revolvers, you're typically limited to 6 rounds total with significantly slower reloads. This capacity advantage becomes even more pronounced in compact and subcompact firearms, where the dimensional differences between calibers force even greater capacity compromises. Reliability. The final critical factor is ammunition reliability. The most perfectly designed bullet is useless if it doesn't feed reliably in your firearm, or if it fails to detonate when you pull the trigger. This is where extensive testing with your specific defensive firearm becomes essential. Different guns often have different reliability characteristics with the same ammunition. What works flawlessly in a Glock might cause feeding issues in a 1911, or vice versa. The gold standard is 500 rounds without a single malfunction before trusting any ammunition for defensive use. That's an expensive proposition with premium defensive ammunition, which is why it's important to find practice ammunition with similar bullet profiles for high-volume testing. Section 5. The ammunition, pros and cons. 9mm Luger. Pros: higher capacity in same-sized firearms, typically 15 to 20 rounds. Significantly less recoil for faster, more accurate follow-up shots. Modern defensive loads perform exceptionally in FBI testing. Most affordable option for regular practice, critical for skill development. Widest selection of firearms from micro-compact to full size. Cons: slightly smaller diameter than larger calibers, may underperform with budget ammunition. Standard pressure loads may not meet FBI standards from very short barrels. Still carry stigma among bigger is better believers. 10mm Auto. Pros: exceptional penetration through barriers and heavy clothing. Higher velocity creates reliable expansion even in shorter barrels. Effective against both human threats and predatory animals. Works well in suppressed applications with heavier bullets. Sweet spot between 9mm and Magnum revolver rounds. Cons: punishing recoil in compact firearms. Significantly reduced capacity compared to 9mm in same-size platforms. Substantially more expensive for practice ammunition. Limited selection of truly compact carry options. 45 ACP. Pros: larger diameter creates bigger permanent wound channel. Excels with subsonic loads for suppressed use. Psychological advantage, intimidation factor. Century-long track record of combat effectiveness. Thrives with standard pressure loads, doesn't need plus P variants. Cons: substantially reduced capacity, typically 8 to 10 rounds. Slower follow-up shots for most shooters. Larger, heavier firearms needed for comfortable shooting. Significantly more expensive training rounds. Physics don't support the knockdown power myth. 40 S&W. Pros: compromise between 9mm capacity and 45's power. good balance of expansion and penetration, widespread law enforcement adoption created ammunition variety, performs well through intermediate barriers, more energy than standard pressure, 9mm. Cons: snappy, hard to control recoil impulse, accelerated wear on firearms due to higher pressure, being phased out by many agencies and manufacturers, more expensive than 9mm for identical training regimen. .357 Magnum. Pros: devastating terminal performance with proper loads, excellent velocity creates reliable expansion with all bullet designs, proven track record spanning decades, available in both revolvers and lever-action carbines. Cons: brutal recoil and muzzle blast, especially from short barrels, limited capacity in revolvers, typically 5 to 7 rounds, significant practice costs with full power loads, few modern firearm designs, impractical for concealed carry by most people. 5.7 by 28mm. Pros: extremely flat trajectory for longer shots, minimal recoil allows rapid, accurate follow-ups, high capacity magazine standard, typically 20+ rounds, excellent performance against soft body armor. Cons: small diameter creates smaller wound channels, specialized ammunition is expensive and sometimes scarce, limited selection of truly defensive-oriented loads, questionable performance in FBI testing protocols, better options exist for civilian defense. 380 ACP. Pros: enables extremely compact, lightweight carry pistols, very manageable recoil for sensitive or smaller shooters. Modern defensive loads now meet FBI minimum penetration. Excellent option for recoil-sensitive individuals. Good concealment characteristics due to smaller firearms. Cons: marginal power even with premium ammunition. Barrier performance significantly worse than larger calibers. Limited expansion with many commercial loads. Reduced terminal effectiveness compared to service calibers. .22 LR. Pros: minimal felt recoil makes it ideal for beginners. Available for numerous firearm platforms, despite its size, highly effective for small game hunting and pest control with minimal meat damage. Widely available at virtually all ammunition retailers and easy to store, transport in large quantities. Cons: generally considered insufficient for primary self-defense purposes against humans. Rimfire ignition system is inherently less reliable than centerfire ammunition. Greater performance variations between brands and lots compared to centerfire ammunition. Rimfire priming compound can degrade faster than centerfire primers with greater sensitivity to moisture and environmental factors. Section 6. The surprising contender. This tiny rimfire cartridge, the humble .22 long rifle, is statistically America's deadliest bullet. Not the AR-15's 5.56mm, not the AK-47's 7.62 by 39mm, not even the 9mm found in most service pistols. Now we know what you're thinking. Come on. That little plinker? No way. But the evidence is overwhelming. A comprehensive study by the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office found that more deaths were attributed to .22 caliber rounds than any other single caliber. FBI crime statistics back this up year after year. The question isn't whether the .22 LR tops the fatality list, it's why. Section 7. Why .22 LR tops the list? The .22 LR is the most produced ammunition in the world. It's inexpensive, widely available, and owned by more Americans than any other caliber. Because of its low cost and mild recoil, more people practice with and carry .22 LR firearms than any other caliber. The perceived weakness of the round means both shooters and victims often fail to treat it with appropriate caution. The .22 LR has been in continuous production since 1887, giving it a much longer track record than most modern cartridges. Section 8. Historical perspective. The .22 LR's deadly potential isn't just theoretical. When John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Reagan in 1981, it was with a .22 LR revolver. The bullet ricocheted off the presidential limousine and fragmented, nearly killing Reagan. Israeli intelligence agency Mossad reportedly favored .22 pistols for close-range assassinations, specifically because of their quiet report and lethal efficiency. Professional hitmen have made similar choices throughout criminal history. Section 9. Real-world impact. The numbers tell a clear story. According to nationwide data, approximately 2.5 million .22 LR rounds are manufactured daily in the United States alone, far exceeding production of any other caliber. The average American gun owner possesses multiple .22 LR firearms and thousands of rounds due to its affordability and versatility. This sheer volume means more opportunities for both legitimate use and misuse. So there you have it. America's most lethal bullet isn't what most people expect. The humble point: .22 long rifle has claimed more lives than any other caliber, not because it's inherently more deadly, but because of its prevalence, accessibility, and our tendency to underestimate its potential. This isn't meant to demonize the .22 LR or suggest it needs additional regulation. Rather, it's a reminder of a fundamental truth about firearms. Respect and responsibility matter more than caliber or capacity. The next time someone dismisses a firearm because it's just a .22, remember the statistical reality behind this unassuming round. Sometimes the least impressive-looking option is secretly the most impactful. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Have you been surprised by the effectiveness of the .22 LR? Or do you have a different perspective on America's most lethal round? Drop your comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into firearms facts and myths. Until next time, stay safe, train hard, and remember, knowledge is your best defense.